Hey there, welcome to the very first episode of the Playing in the Sandbox podcast, where I am deeply committed to inspiring action in today's leaders. And I'm Tammy J. Bond, your host. Today you have me in the sandbox all to yourself, and I am so thrilled that you've joined me. So let's kick off our shoes, let's step into the sandbox, dig our toes in, and get ready to get into some really great content that I love to talk about, which is leading yourself well. Now, I've been looking forward to this episode for a while, so get ready because we got a lot to cover in a quick amount of time. It's one of my favorite topics, and it's filled with action steps that you can apply to your leadership, to your life, and even to your family. So you're going to want to head over to tammyjbond.com/sandbox podcast and get today's action plan from the episode. They're actually going to be available every time I launch new content, an action plan filled with something else I really love, powerful questions. So head on over to tammyjbond.com/sandbox podcast to sign up and get your action plan from today's episode so that you can up-level your leadership and have those action items to apply to all areas of your life. Now grab a pen and paper because I've got some great content we're going to dive into today's episode on leading yourself well. Thanks for joining me in the sandbox. Hey, all right, let's get going with 4 tips to leading yourself well. You know, this is one of those topics that I have loved to talk on. And if you've been following me for any period of time on social media, you've even seen me make posts about the importance of leading yourself well before you lead others. You know, I know from experience that we have often promoted people who build a widget really well, but they don't know how to build people, right? We've promoted them into leadership positions because they do a task or a job well, but we never equip them with the tools to lead others well. Well, what I learned over my years of being in the consulting and coaching world is that, and working with leaders like you, what I've learned is that not only do we not teach you how to lead others well, we're not doing a great job at teaching you, the leader, how to lead yourself well. Now, you might be saying, hey, Tam, what does that even mean, lead myself well? I'm a good person. There's things that I do in the world. I'm a contributor. My team's doing pretty good. You know, I'd like to see some better performance. Or maybe you're thinking, you know, I want to get into some leadership. And what does it mean? How do I lead myself well? Or how do I know if I'm not leading myself well? Well, if you want to check into how you might not be leading yourself well, check your friends, family, and colleagues around you. Check in with them and ask them, what are the 3 things I model on a daily basis? And if something comes up about, you know, negativity or a disgruntled individual, or gosh, you kind of got a temper, you're not very effective with your communication, or if you're, you know, playing in the sandbox of corporate America, you might be hoarding all the resources and keeping them too close to the vest. Now, if you're around emotionally aware people, they might be able to tell you those things, but maybe not, right? So then what do? How do you figure out if you're not leading yourself well? Well, you can look at the performance of yourself and the people around you. Look at your own level of satisfaction. You know, pull out an oldie but a goodie and do like your own little balance wheel of life to figure out, hey, how am I feeling in all areas of my life? In the 8 most important areas of my life, how am I feeling? I'm tracking, or on a scale of 1 to 10. You can check in with that level of satisfaction. And if it's on the low side, then you get to go, well, what can I change in me to change that so I've got greater satisfaction, so that I'm leading myself well in the decision making, right? And I'm leading myself well in the action steps that I'm taking to lead others. It's a big topic that I'm probably going to come back to multiple times in our podcast episodes, but for right now, I want to make sure I get you 4 tips today, because those tips are going to help you to uncover and discover for yourself how you are leading, how you're leading you. The most important leader in your life is YOU, you. And there's no mentor, and there's no book to read, and there's no, honestly, even course to take that can help you to lead better if you're not leading yourself well first. So what does it require? Well, Something I love to say is, and really firmly believe in, you cannot change what you cannot define. So the first step in leading yourself well is to look in the mirror. Now, I've already kind of given you some of those tips that you could do in checking in with other people and looking at the action steps that you're taking in your day-to-day life to see how you're leading through life. But you cannot change what you cannot define. Write that one down. That's a good little nugget right there. So if you're looking at how to change and evolve as a leader, look in the mirror and start asking some questions about what are the areas that I see that I might be deficient in? What are people saying about me, or what are people's reactions to the way that I lead them or the way that I partner with them? Am I a partner? Do I team well? Right? All of these things actually go into or apply to us being able to lead ourselves well. So once we define the areas that maybe we're not leading so well individually, the areas that we struggle with individually, maybe we're an individual that, I know one leader that I've worked with over the years that has really struggled with their own, I'm going to say, negative outlook on every situation. They lean to the negative. They immediately go to doom and gloom. The sky is falling. Everything's falling apart. And then I get to come in and ask them questions. Well, when has it fallen apart before? When have you actually experienced the doom and gloom that you're saying could happen with this situation, right? Let's reflect back historically. When has this happened? This one leader that comes to mind could not actually answer that question with anything that confirmed the doom and gloom that they perceive the world with in their leadership role. Okay. So then we get to go into, okay, how are you framing up the way you look at the work before you, the team that you're with, the project at hand, the business you're launching? How are you framing it up in your thinking? That looking in the mirror is going deep and looking into yourself to uncover and unpack those very limiting beliefs, those very challenges that you put before you as obstacles that actually are fictitious. They're fake. They're a mystery novel because they really just, there is no outcome to them that you can confirm have actually happened. When you are leaning in that negative direction, looking in the mirror helps to expose that, to say, okay, if not this, then what? Right? You're going to hear me say that a lot on our podcast episodes. I'm going to challenge you. You're facing something you don't want. Then you say, okay, if I don't want this, and what do I want? And how do I go about getting it? And this actually builds into a very important tool for leading yourself well: your soft skills. Now, if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk online at all, you've seen him doing a lot of posts. I see him on LinkedIn all the time doing posts on the number one most important thing isn't hard skills in today's business world, it's soft skills. So leading yourself well, yeah, you got to have those soft skills as well, right? You being an effective communicator, an effective problem solver, being effective with your managing your times and your projects and your team, and having critical thinking skills. And there's so many more that are important. Being able to set aside what I call thinking time so you can get into that creativity that's required in leadership as well. All of these pieces are important for you to apply as you're looking in the mirror and even going through and looking at the list of soft skills and asking yourself, rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, friend. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. How am I doing? Ask your team, ask those that work closest with you, ask your family, because they'll probably be the most honest with you, to rate you on how you're doing on those soft skills. That's going to help you to reflect in the mirror. What are the challenges that I face? Where are the gaps in my leading myself, right? Where are those gaps, and how do I close those gaps, or how do I fill them in? I was just telling a client the other day who had asked a really great question. She said, "Hey, Tam, I'm curious. I'm hiring a deputy. I'm hiring a number 2. And I want to know, how do I know if they're a good fit?" Well, one of the ways to know if someone's a good fit is to know your gaps, right? Understand where your weaknesses are and understand, okay, do I want this person to help fill those gaps where that are not my strengths, right? I mean, personal, kind of tattling on Tammy here. I am not one that is super great at all of the details of the minutia of things. I need people around me to do that. I need a producer to produce my podcast for me and put together the show notes and the action plans for me that come after the show, because that's just not, I can do it. It's not my jam. So it's not my strength. I know it's a gap because it won't be perfect. So I won't get it out, my vision. And so I need others to help move that forward, right? This podcast, great example. It's been on my heart for 2 years, and I kept thinking, oh, I can do it myself. Oh, I've got all the skills. I got all the tools. I signed up for the classes. I got everything together. I'm not a detailed person that way. I can do it, but it's not my jam. I want to dialogue with people and inspire action in people to make changes in their life. And getting into the weeds is not my jam. It's not my thing. And my strengths finder will tell you, not my thing. Now, am I strategic? Yes. Am I a strategic thinker? Absolutely. And that's important to understanding. So when you're looking to hire someone, I told her, I said, here's what you want to do. You want to look at the gaps you want filled and then create your questions around those gaps to see find the person that can help fill those gaps for you. That's called teaming and aligning with someone who's going to raise you up to be better. Oftentimes people hire those that, look just like them, sound just like them, and, oh, we're going to be a great fit. And it's a epic failure because they have the same skills you do, right? That doesn't make it for a good unity. That makes it for not complementary because you are both now having the same gaps in your leadership. Anyways, I digress. Let's get back on track. 4 tips, right? First one, look in the mirror and assess for yourself and ask people around you, where are my gaps in my leading? Here's the second one, and this is really important. It's confronting those destructive actions that you make and others make. Those destructive actions around you need to be confronted. And how do we do that? Well, we start asking more questions, but we first want to listen with intention to understand, why is the destructive behavior there? Or why is the negative leaning mindset there? I want to ask the question and then listen with intention, not to solve, but to understand. Especially this is important with teams. So leading yourself well is seeking to understand, yes, and listening, asking those questions to listen with intention to understand versus solve. And that's a big one right there. When we listen to seek to understand, it now changes us off of focusing on the symptoms around it, but focusing on the root of the problem, right? So when we have challenges that we're facing, leading people or ourselves well, there's a root to that issue that we want to get to. We can usually talk about all the peripheral items that are the symptoms, that are the cause, that are the irritations, but we're not, until we really dive into the root and we ask ourselves and we go deep and listen and seek with intention, right? Number 2, listen with intention, not to solve, but to understand. We get to the understanding of the root of the problem so that we can actually create a plan to fix it. How about that? Now, here's something I want to make sure that you know. As leaders, it takes courage to acknowledge that you're probably part of the root of the problem. I mean, let's be real, right? Back in the day when I first launched in my own, in my coaching and consulting, I would say, I help leaders who are frustrated with their dysfunctional teams. It was my tagline. And I went on to say to take the groups they have and transform them into the high performing team they want. And yeah, I still do that today. And I still say that I'm here to help you with your dysfunctional team. And people would say to me, Tim, why would you name a team dysfunctional before you've even met them? But also, how are you expecting a leader to bring you in? Doesn't that like put a negative spin in the team's eyes that, well, gosh, if she helps leaders who are frustrated with the dysfunctional teams, does that mean we're dysfunctional? Hey, I'm really okay with that. Because the truth of the matter is, if the team is dysfunctional, it's the leader at the root of the problem, not the team. It's the leader, right? And so I'm okay if that leader gets the attention of the leader to bring me in to work with the team, when really it's the leader that I want to get in and do some work with. I mean, think about that for a minute. How many times have you actually seen a problem and we put, we bring out the full color, the box of crayons to color the picture around the problem, but never really get to the root of it. But we want everybody to feel good, or we want it to look good, and we want it to be okay. But the root of the problem is reflecting the mirror on the leader that's actually causing the issue to begin with, right? So just know this, friend, you are being courageous right now to even acknowledge that if I'm not leading myself well, how might I be a root of the problem that I'm facing, my family's facing, my team, my company, my business is facing? It takes courage. And I want to give you these action steps to help you in identifying how to make the shift and transition to lead yourself better, right? So look in the mirror. Listen with intention after asking your questions. Listen with the intention to understand, right? Not to solve, but to understand first, because that's going to expose the root that you're really going for, to understand the root of the problem. And here's the other piece. There's this whole element on leading ourselves well about personal capacity, and it's super important. So you're going to want to make sure you get the show notes because and the action plan, because I've got some great information in there about personal capacity and how you expand it and increase it. But understanding your personal capacity requires you, number 3, suspend judgment. Yep. Suspend judgment of others, suspend judgment of self. When you're faced with a challenge, an obstacle, or a problem, we can tend to go into fix it mode, and then we're judging people. Why'd they do this? How come they did that? Why would it end up that way? Stop. Stop accusing and stop judging without knowing. Because when we're listening to solve and get to the root and we suspend judgment, it actually opens ourselves up to the possibility of what's next. And at that root level, we can't solve it till we get underneath it. I can liken it to even to farming, right? If you've ever tried growing a plant, the roots become infected, or they become diseased, or they become dry with drought, and then the whole plant isn't thriving, right? So you want to get to the roots and make sure the root is healthy, right? Cultivate that soil around you by asking and inquiring, and suspending judgment helps you to see what's possible. Now, listen, understanding that personal capacity piece and how it applies to suspending judgment is like this. When I'm not achieving something, I'm immediately probably, maybe not always, but probably I'm going into, or you might be going into, I'm not achieving, or the team's not achieving. And so we're judging the reasons why, right? And when we want to understand what our capacity is, our capacity to ask more questions, our capacity to listen with intention, our capacity to get to the root and solve at the root level, right? By understanding what's going on, that requires capacity that sometimes we can say, I don't have time. Well, time is sort of a capacity issue, but it's also a planning issue, right? So take time off the table, because if you had all of the time, you would have made the priority to solve the issue, right? Getting to that root, seeking to understand at that root level, you would have increased your capacity, right? Because you would understand that I can take time off the table, and this is my number one priority because I understand it at a root level, and all of a sudden time is insignificant because I want to get to that root to get it healthy, to fix it, to change it, right? That's the important piece. But I got to suspend judgment to not judge myself that I've done something wrong, I'm failing, the team isn't equipped, whatever that story is, right? Stop the storytelling. It should have been like tip number 5, right? So tip number 3, suspend judgment of self and others, because as you're looking at that root and you're getting in there to heal that root, to understand what's really going on and help to put the fix in place, it's going to be of paramount importance that you apply number 4, because it leads right into this. Ask for help and ask for input, right? Once it's been identified and you've got the root, you've reflected in the mirror and you've listened and you've asked and you've identified the root, you're suspending judgment to be creative, right? To increase your personal capacity to find that outcome. You want to ask others for help. It's not if it's meant to be, it's up to me. That's faulty thinking. And a lot of you probably maybe come up out of an environment where it has to, if it's going to be done, it's got to be you or it's not at all. And the truth of the matter is this, friend, you're not Superman, you're not Superwoman. That's only in the comics and the movies. They're not real. You might don the shirt, right? You might have the plaque on the wall. Maybe you got a really cool award that says you are. The truth of the matter is no one is. We're only as good as the people around us that make us shine and that bring the supports and that we feel confident and comfortable being able to ask for help with. If we don't feel comfortable or we're not capable of asking for help, that's one of the biggest hindrances to leading yourself well. You're going to work with your people and want your team or your friends or your family to come to you when they need help if you're also not willing to ask for it. It makes you look unapproachable. It makes you look like, well, if he has it all together, right? If you have it all together, what does that say about me? And we can go all the way back through the tips and go, well, right there, judging and, I'm not looking at the root and, all of those pieces. But for you to ask for input and ask for help exposes at a root level, right? Reflecting in the mirror, right? What's going on that's causing you to not lead yourself effectively and efficiently in the manner that's going to be most supportive to producing the outcomes you say you want. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a minute and I want you to identify some of the areas that you may be lacking in. I want you to do the same with your team, those colleagues that you work with, and just open it up for dialogue. Some of the best leaders that I've had the opportunity to spend time with are the ones that are willing to sit at the boardroom table or in today's world on the Zoom call and say, here's what I'm working on. Here's where I see I'm lacking. And I would love your feedback. I'd love your input. And they create a safe environment for those around them to share what they're seeing. I worked with a young leader a few years ago, and it's really one of my favorite stories because I'll tell you what, I actually went into the room and left day one thinking, that brother's going to have a fall. He has an ego that is bigger than the entire state that we were in, right? Like he was something else and he knew it. He was extra special and he knew it. And everybody around him told him that. And I said, I don't see it. So I kind of confronted it with them, not kind of, because I'm not a kind of person. I confronted it. I did it in a respectful manner, and I did it over a series of weeks, a period of time. And we went through the program and he did well. He did exactly what everybody thought he would do. He was the golden boy. He was the winner for the program, right? Everybody knew it. And I was not impressed. Just wasn't impressed. But here's what's interesting. I said, you're going to have a fall and it's going to come it's going to come at some point. And this whole world that you built is going to come crashing down. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to make sure that you have my contact information. I want you to reach out when that happens. And he was really not a fan of Tammy. I got to be honest. He just was not a fan of Tammy. And I was kind of not really a fan of him because he had so much ego. I just was like, oh man, here's the mirror. He didn't want to look at the mirror. His mirror was rose colored as the glasses that he looked through. But about, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 6 months after the engagement ended, I got a call and he says, Tammy, you said I could call you and I just need to process something through. Well, he fell and he fell hard. And over the next year, we had a conversation about that fall and about the challenge. And I'm thrilled to say it was one of the most impactful times for him as a leader, as an individual contributor, because he understood what he was lacking, right? He found out where his blind spots were. He found out where his ego was getting in his way. He asked for input. He asked for help. He reached out to fill in the gaps, and today is thriving and better than ever, and authentically and transparently so. And it's one of my favorite stories because it just goes to show that we'll hit that wall at some point if we're not willing to confront it. And I want you to say, I want to tell you today, friend, I want you to confront it today. So ask for the help around you and be willing to take the helping hand when it comes your way about what you're doing and how you're impacting leaders and leadership all around you and the team that you work with and your family that you work with. So important. ask for input from others, and be willing to listen with intention, right? To get to the root, right? To understand, right? Listen with intention and look in the mirror. Is this true? Does this resonate? Does it not? Why does it not? How might it? What do I do with this? All of these great questions. And you're going to want to make sure you sign up to get the action plan, because I'm going to give you these steps in the after action plan, I should say, of today's podcast. So just to recap with you, I want you to think about this. How are your soft skills? And on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you leading yourself? Look in the mirror, number 1, right? I want you to look in the mirror. And then I want you to ask yourself, how am I leading myself? And I want you to listen with the intention to get to the root. Confront things that might be destructive. That's what my friend did that I was sharing with you that had the big ego. He had to actually confront the things that were destructive in his leading. Didn't understand. He didn't see it before, and it took a fall to see it. Let's get you before the fall, because that's going to equip you with the tools to succeed at every level of leading yourself and others. And suspend judgment on the journey. Don't be harsh on yourself. Don't be harsh on others around you when they give you the input. Don't be judging what they say or why they say it or how do they know. No. Suspend judgment. Going back to listening with intention as you're reflecting in the mirror, and then asking for help in the areas that have been exposed. Remember, we all have gaps, right? We fill the gaps with the people around us that actually have the skill sets we don't in the areas that we most need. And it makes us better in every aspect of life. And I want to leave you with this last thought, because it's actually one of my favorite quotes by one of my, probably my all-time favorite leadership podcast. It's actually the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. He's a pastor, he's a leadership expert, and he's phenomenal with the tips that he shares. And one of my favorite things is this, and I want you to remember it for yourself. So write this down. People would rather follow a leader who's always real than one who is always right. Think about that, friend. And how are you showing up when it comes to the kind of leader you think you are, they say you are, and you want to be? I have so enjoyed our time in the Sandbox today. Make sure you get the action plan, tammyjbond.com/sandbox podcast. We finished that correctly. And I want you to take some time to reflect on the 4 action steps that I gave you today as you learn the tools and the strategy to leading yourself well. Make it a great day.